Welcome to Own Your Essence, the podcast where healing meets empowerment. We're your host
Lee Walzak.
and April DeMille, two psychic mediums and a life coach specializing in grief, trauma, and toxic relationship recovery. This is a space for deep conversations, powerful transformations, and real, raw healing.
Each week, we'll explore topics ranging from the metaphysical to emotional grief, addiction, mental health, spiritual wellness, and self discovery. Through interviews and personal insights, we aim to spread awareness, foster connection, and support you. You're in the right place if you're ready to set boundaries, reclaim your confidence, and step into your true power. Let's own your essence together.
Podcast disclaimer. The content of this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as medical, psychological, or legal advice. If you need medical or mental health support, please contact a qualified healthcare provider. This podcast also contains explicit language and discussions on sensitive topics, including but not limited to abuse, trauma, addiction, and mental health struggles. Listener discretion is advised, as some content may be triggering or not suitable for younger audiences. By continuing to listen, you acknowledge and accept these terms. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Own Your Essence podcast, where we get to have deep transformational conversations with some of our favorite people. We are your hosts,
Lee Walzak.
and April DeMille. And today we are going to be sitting with a sweet lady named Amy Grace. Lee, I think you have a little more information on her than I do, so I'll let you.
I just might. I
Yeah.
believe she's new to both of us, correct? Right?
Yes, she's new
Um,
to me for sure. I think she's new to you as well.
yes. So she's very interesting, a therapist, a podcast host. So looking forward to the conversation. But yeah, we would love to introduce Amy Grace, Supermom, licensed therapist, author, host of Everyday Supermoms, excuse me, podcast, and supporter of moms everywhere.
Nice. Okay. Here she comes. Here she comes, just a walking down the street.
Down the
Sorry.
street.
Yeah.
I just go with it.
We're just gonna put on a concert now, so that's fun. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. We were singing and putting on a mini concert because we like to get idiotic sometimes,
Fantastic.
but we did just Lee just read your introduction. But if you would like to tell us a little bit more about where you're at in your journey, we could kick it off that way if you'd like.
Yeah, I have spent the majority of my adulthood focused on motherhood is a big part of my journey.
Yeah.
I became a mom really young, and my oldest will be 26 really soon. And then I have more. So I have a total of four biological kiddos and some older kiddos that are step kiddos. And I've spent my whole career as a therapist focusing on moms across the lifespan. So I help them from preconception through empty nesters, because I believe when moms are as healthy as they can be, then it filters out through the whole world.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I also have four children.
Mhm.
One is on the other side.
Mm.
And my oldest now is 25 and my youngest is turning 18 in like 2 weeks.
Oh,
So,
wow. So
so
it looks like you must have had yours fairly young too, because
I
you
did.
look.
I did. I mean, I'm 40, I'm 46 now. That's right, everybody.
Okay.
I just told the
Yeah.
world my age, but like I'm 46 now and I've had the range of experience, like I'm going through empty nesters now,
Hmm.
and that is a whole different beast of its own. So I
Totally.
think there's lots that we could get into here for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm passionate about is helping moms on all the different parts of the lifespan. And, I'm kind of in multiple of them at the same time because my oldest stepson is 29 and they have two boys already. So I have grandbabies all the way down to my youngest is still in elementary school. So I've got a pretty big span there.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you've got a span for sure. Keeps you on your toes. So I'm also my Muggle world job. I'm a nanny. So I'm do private nanny stuff. So that keeps me engaged with all the little kid stuff still.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I have a cat, so that's how
I have one of
that's where
those
we're at.
too.
Awesome. That's amazing. I'm sorry, April, did you have something else you want to
No, no,
add?
no. Go ahead.
So Amy, so you actually, this is a little bit of a shift from the motherhood. I'd love to circle like the motherhood work. I'd love to circle back to that
Totally.
because I know you have a podcast and a book and
Hmm.
all the fun things. Um, I am curious. I'm always curious about this when I talk to a therapist, though, or anyone that works in kind of like mental health or anything like that. Um, because I know for me, like, so I don't know if you're aware, but I'm a psychic medium and I do work in
Hmm.
that area. So I know for me, like in my life, there are, if I meet someone for the first time, there's always kind of, or not always, but sometimes there's this sort of, oh, do you feel anyone around me? And I've kind of had to learn how to put up boundaries around that, where it's like, well, I'm not in working hours, so to speak, right now. And I'm always curious of especially if someone does work as like a therapist or something like that, like how you've felt that you've kind of had to navigate boundaries with things like that and like where you have to kind of take that therapist hat off and kind of just be Amy. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of us therapists who, depending on the context, we won't even tell people that's what we do just because we don't want to have to go there. Um, the whole like, oh, are you analyzing me? No,
Yeah.
no. Shockingly, I don't work off the clock. However, most of us get into this field because it kind of works with who we are, right? Like,
Yes.
we're caring, we are curious, we are supportive. So, like, a lot of it does kind of happen naturally. It's not as clean cut as, my friend who's a hairstylist. It's really obvious when she's on the clock and not, right? Like, oh, are you cutting my hair? No, then you're not on the clock. Versus as a therapist, some of what I do is very similar to the conversations I might have with a friend.
Yeah.
Like, my good friends, I'm going to ask them the same good, deep, probing, reflective kind of questions as I might my clients, but I'm not being their therapist. So it gets stickier for sure. And I'd say one of the things that I've noticed about myself is I actually ask people in my personal life a lot less questions because
Mm.
I'm like not wanting to be the therapist. So I actually feel like I ask my clients a lot more questions than I do my own like family or friends because I'm trying to not cross that line.
Yeah.
Interesting. That,
But it,
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me though, because I feel like in April you might relate to, but I feel like I do the same thing with my work where I try not to ask certain questions and I try to stay away from certain topics because I'm like, I don't want to kind of cross that threshold. Um, so that's, yeah, I find that interesting. So thank you for that.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a good question.
It's a great question. There are plenty of times, even with my kids, where my kids will have to say, I want my mom, not the therapist. And I'm not a therapist, by the way,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I am a life coach and I specialize in grief and all the things. And
Hmm.
there is a lot of education there. And so they will have to say, they will have to verbalize, hey, this is what I need right now. And I go, okay, I get that. Like,
Hmm.
because what I will say, you say that you don't ask certain questions, and I'm the opposite. I tend to do all the work because I'm a very deep soul observer. And so
Hmm.
it's just ingrained in me. It is who I
Hmm.
am. Like you said, it is part of who I am. So like, yeah, you might not want this healing part of me, but I can't get rid of it. That
Right. And I
is
would say
it.
just,
It's all
yeah,
encompassing,
I would say to some extent that part never turns off. Like I'm
right?
still going to ask a certain amount, but like I
Right.
just may not probe as much.
Yeah.
Like,
Like you
you
can put it in the
know,
back seat, sort of.
yes, it kind of,
Yeah.
when I'm talking to like a more um not as deep of a level friend, I'm not going to be like, well, tell me how that made you feel and
Right.
what came up inside of you as you said that.
Yeah.
Like, whereas I might do something somewhat similar, but not that therapist-y, creepy voice with my children.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I love that.
Yeah,
I love
it's
that
pretty
too. And I was
interesting how we
curious about
can
that too, Amy, because
go ahead.
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say,
I was
I
gonna say
think
I
that
was
that's
curious
true of a
about that
lot of
too.
us helpers.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Right, and to ride on the coattails of that, I was curious about that because I took a little look at your Instagram. I like to kind of, see what people's energy feels like beforehand.
Lee's our private eye. He does all the research.
Nice.
He's
Um,
so good at his job, I'm telling you.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
But I saw a video that you had posted where you were speaking about, how you had someone, because you have a podcast called Everyday Supermoms, correct?
Yep.
Um, and you had a video where you said, oh, I had this woman reach out to me after she heard my podcast and she felt so seen and heard. And, she was going to show her husband and everything. And what really struck me about that video in terms of you and your energy, I felt like my interpretation of the energy in that was you really uh, genuinely caring about helping other people feel seen and heard. And I'm like, oh, it totally makes sense. She's a therapist. Um,
Yes.
so I was curious too about, yeah, like that's kind of where that stemmed from a little bit, where the boundaries kind of come in. Because I think sometimes when we do have this certain archetype to our personality, we really do want genuinely to have other people be seen and witnessed by us and heard. And I think that's so much a part of our human connection anyway. Like we're all just kind of looking for that in some way. Um,
hmm
so yeah, that
Well,
was
and
just
that's so much of my podcast. The reason I created it was not only to have a platform for these moms to share their amazing stories, but also for those who are listening to hear a story and feel seen and heard so that they're like, I'm not alone in these feelings. I'm not alone in this experience. Other people have dealt with this. Sometimes it's even like embarrassing moments or things like that, that they're just like, oh, it's okay for me to admit this out loud. Maybe it's what helps them to go seek help. Maybe they go to their own therapist. Maybe it's they get some coaching. Maybe it's they, even just have a conversation with a friend for the first time about something that they didn't know that they could share out loud. And so I think one of the beautiful things about sharing stories is that it does connect people and help them to feel not alone in their journey.
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why we were inspired to create our podcast too, is, just giving a platform for people to have a voice and to feel safe doing it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would love for a second too, for you to talk more about your podcast. So it's called Everyday Supermoms. And how long have you been doing the podcast now?
Mine's relatively new. I just launched it in December. This
Awesome.
As of
Congrats.
the time of recording this, I have 42 episodes out there and growing.
Nice.
So it is growing really fast, and I've shared some amazing stories. But each week we share on Mondays, I launch an episode that is me interviewing a different mom about her story. And we've talked about all sorts of things from perinatal mental health and birth trauma, infertility, adoption, child loss, anxiety,
Ooh, I have a
depression.
great guess for you. We should send her Janae.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna reach out to Janae and see if she if I can connect you two if you're okay with that.
Yeah, send me people. I would love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, she would be
So,
great for you.
yeah, basically, I'm just looking for anybody who has a great story and can show how supermoms can all look so very different. That there is no one type of supermom, but we are supermoms when we are harnessing our own individual strength and owning our essence.
Nice.
Yeah, you did
Hey.
there. That
Nice
was good.
spin, lady. Love it. Yeah, that's
I love
good.
that. Um, did you have anything you wanted to ask April?
I don't really have questions formulated yet, but
Okay.
I do, if you don't have any questions right now, I do kind of want to dig into more of the empty nester stuff. So you let me know. Um,
I do, but we can go either way. We can just edit this piece
let's
out, I
just
guess.
do, no, I'm all for raw stuff. So if you want to finish with your questions and then we can kind of dive into that. Sorry, Amy, we're just trying to organize our
No,
thoughts here.
you're good. You're good. Editing's a beautiful tool.
Yeah.
Um, so you also have a book though called The Good Enough Supermom, correct?
Yes, it's not out yet. It is still, in
Okay.
fact, I can't give you a hard date yet, but yes, it is one that I'm working on hard still. And it is based on the idea that um, so many moms are constantly striving and not feeling good enough. And they're constantly feeling like they need to do more, be more, achieve more, be more present, and all these things. And ultimately, what I've come up with over the course of my career and working with moms is that there's more core things that really come down to being the root of what it takes to truly be a good enough mom. And they are the kind of patterns that I've seen in not only in working with moms that are amazing moms, but also in working with I work with adults who often are reflecting back on their own, how they were parented. And so I've gotten a pretty good handle on what the things were that really mattered when they were good and what the things were that really mattered when they weren't so good.
Awesome. Beautiful. I love that. Um, I like to ask this question of authors a lot too. I've never written a book, but I know people who have, and it seems like it would be such a interesting kind of experience to have. But I'm curious, like throughout your writing process, if anything kind of came up in you that you sort of had to meet in the moment, different pieces of yourself that you had to meet. Because I know sometimes people will speak to, I didn't realize that this was going to surface as I was kind of writing my book. And maybe part of me that I kind of suppressed even, or whatever it is, and there's different facets that tend to come up, not for everybody, but that's why
Hmm.
I asked. But certain shadow aspects, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
things that are kind of just below the surface. So I'm curious if you had any experience like that, or have had as you continue to write, because I know you said it's not
Yeah.
out yet.
Yeah, I would say not as much with the content of the book,
Mm,
but of writing a book in general, probably
Oh, yeah.
in
yeah.
the sense of like, what if I put forth all this work and nobody reads it? Or like the other side of it, like because I do so much work with moms and motherhood is my specific jam, as of right now, all four of my kids are saying I'm a great mom. But I'm just like envisioning them at like 30 being like, she wrote this book to like help moms, and secretly she was terrible. So I think there's like those kind of fears, but they're
Yeah.
not necessarily like as I'm reading, like writing this stuff, going like, ooh, that's not good. Like it's
Yeah.
more like the bigger picture of like the concept of writing a book on motherhood. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
would be
just,
curious.
oh,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say, and just like attacking the fears or facing the fears of putting yourself out there, because how
Hmm.
vulnerable is that anyway?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think is fascinating is like, you know, as I've been in this sphere of podcasting, but even before that, coaching, and even before that, therapy, all
Yeah.
these things, one of the things that I've come to realize in the world is that who makes it big isn't necessarily who has the most talent or the most gifting.
Right.
It's often the marketing is really what it comes down to, and who is just really good at selling things. Like I've, listened to a couple podcasts that are ranked really highly, and I'm like, really? Huh. And then I've listened to some that are ranked pretty low, and but they're phenomenal. And so like even in like the podcast world, I've seen that. Or
Yeah.
like, we're recording this in the midst of the NFL draft, and I don't know if anyone out there is listening that loves it football, but I love football. I've got so many different sides to me. But I was literally getting a pedicure while watching the draft on my phone. And I was fascinated because like they rank all these players going into the draft, and who gets put first isn't always the most talented.
Mm,
And you see that time and time again in life. Like the people that are making millions of dollars at something aren't necessarily the ones that are the best. Like there are some phenomenal, for instance, pick anything, pick a singer. There are some phenomenal singers that just sing in their shower and will never make it big. Whereas there's some professional singers that without auto-tune, God bless them. Like, so I
yeah.
just think it's interesting to put yourself out there, whether it's out in podcasting or writing a book or whatever, just to be like, okay, I'm going to do my best and then we'll just see what happens out there. Like I have no control after that.
I want to say there was it was the so I'm currently trying to launch a couple books. I have several that I want to write, but I've only gotten to like chapters 1 and 2 and 3, I think, on like three of them. So I'm still very like beginning this project, but I want to say the best thing I've heard so far, and I can't remember where I read it, was to write like no one's ever going to read it.
Hmm.
To
Mm,
just write your heart out and don't ever expect a single person to read it. So it's raw, unfiltered, all the things. And I was like, that sounds like something I would do.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
that's kind of where I'm focusing too. And
yeah,
even when I started my podcast, I actually said, and I keep reminding myself that if each episode only makes a difference to even one person,
then
it
it
will
made
feel
it.
worthwhile.
Yeah, then it made a
And
difference.
it made a difference. And
Yeah,
so it's like when you can have those kind of markers, like, I don't need to be the most famous in the world. I don't need to be the wealthiest. I don't need to be, whatever, but I want to make a difference.
right.
It's like, well, you can make a difference to one person.
Right. You just know that you need to make an impact and you're not sure like out you're not attached to the outcome of what that impact looks like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what authentic kind of purpose really is, what you just said. Whereas if you're basing it on like numbers or you're basing it on something external, if those things shift or change, then so therein does your own feelings about yourself that you've kind of connected to this external thing. So I think, really that's what it comes down to is like I am authentically kind of expressing in this way, and this feels purposeful for me on this internal type of level.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, and that's what I do when I do my work with moms is I help them to create a motherhood that they truly love, like that hones their individual purpose. That I'm not trying to create like an army of moms that all look the same. That sounds scary and creepy. But like, but like rather
We
I
don't
work
want
with
mom
moms.
zombies.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of what I envisioned. It was like, I don't like that thought. But rather, like, if each mom is functioning within her strengths, within her personality, like within her specific piece of the puzzle, and for her specific set of kids, she's going to thrive more. She's going to actually enjoy it more. But if she's trying to like function like somebody else, like maybe she sees some Instagram person or even her best friend or sister, and she's trying to mom like that, then she's not functioning authentically in the world. And she is going to be drained and she's going to be more exhausted and she's going to be grumpy. And it's not going to be a pleasant experience for her or her kids, frankly.
Right, because she's trying to fit into a box that she didn't even create for herself. It's a
Exactly.
box that somebody else created for her, whether it's, you know, society, family, whatever, but someone built this little box. You're supposed to fit into it, and that doesn't work.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's why, I've toyed with changing the name of my coaching program called Create Your Own Motherhood, but it really kind of encapsulates it for me right now. Like I've thought about like motherhood remodel or something like that, because that also kind of works. But it's like how do we create this vision of motherhood that actually works for you and works with your strengths and your personality and your family and not based on some weird social media construct or societal pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
And it's really, I want to say, I want to just kind of add, I know we already talked about, the pressures of society or whatever, but it can be extremely challenging to stand firm in who you are when you have people in your family that are also very toxic and abusive. And because you're healthy, they come at you. You're the black sheep. You're the thing that triggers all the shit underneath them that needs to come out and be looked at. And so it's really hard. I even have a fairly new family member within the last few years that I'm having some struggles with on that, like
Mhm.
trying to accept new families. So like when you have like kids that are older and like in-laws that are coming in, son-in-laws, daughter-in-laws, mother-in-laws, whatever it is, right? And I can actually speak on this. I'm going through a situation with my son and my daughter-in-law to be, and it's
Mhm.
been excruciating because there's outside influence that's directly affecting their decision making, and you have to just let them figure it out.
Yeah, it's, when you've got so many different voices into the picture,
Yeah,
and one of the things that I see with my clients, especially in my therapy office, is as they get healthier over time, you start to see new things arise. Like I've seen it where, for instance, a woman may be married to a classic narcissist, and as the woman gets healthier, it can create more problems in the
totally.
dynamic because she's now setting boundaries, and the other person's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well,
No.
because now your eyes are fucking open
Yeah.
and you can't unsee it now. And
Hmm.
and so then they have to cling harder to the control and the abuse. That's exactly what
Hmm.
happens.
Yes.
Yeah, fun stuff. I've definitely had my walk with all those. So,
Yeah.
I would be curious too, Amy, because the way you speak about the motherhood themes and all of that, it feels so eloquent and self-aware and other words that I can't think of at the moment, but all of in that basket. Um, so I'm kind of curious, like, if you had a moment in your life, where for you personally, you kind of shifted into this um, idea of, I want to be a conscious parent. And conscious, I just mean in the way of, being regulated, being aware of all my own multi-dimensionality. And, because that's what we're bringing into, I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that's what we're bringing into our parenting. So I'd be curious if you kind of had that moment, or it was just kind of like a gradual sort of evolution, or maybe it's always been a part of really who you are.
I think it's kind of a both and, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I was fortunate to read a book when my oldest daughter was 2. The book is out of print. But I'm hoping to get the author on my podcast. But the book kind of talked about like having a vision for motherhood in the sense of like having character traits that you really want to nurture in your kids. And that kind of book, I think the biggest thing I got out of that is this piece of intentionality that motherhood shouldn't be about survival, but rather like if we are goal focused and we think, oh, this is what I want to nurture in my kids. I want them to grow up to be kind humans. I want them to be, filled with integrity or whatever those character traits might be, that you're nurturing those and you do it intentionally. So I had that very early. And gosh, she was around 2, so I would have been like 20. I was a baby when
Mm.
I had that realization. And then as I went through training to be a therapist, you do a lot of your own work. And I am a big fan that all therapists I say every good therapist needs a good therapist.
oh,
Um,
I definitely second that because I say that for coaches too. Every therapist, every coach, everybody needs
yes.
somebody to work with and be a sounding board and help them, just a guide.
hmm
Yeah.
And not that we have to work with them like every single week for the rest of our lives or anything,
No.
but in seasons, as things
Yeah.
come up and you're like, oop, there's something I need to deal with, that we know who to call to deal with our stuff. So I've done a lot of my own work. And I think on the whole, my motherhood journey is the part of my life that I'm the most proud of, in that I have been really intentional. I feel like I'm successful in the sense that my kids so far are really good humans. They're not perfect, but I'm proud of who they are. And I could tell you I haven't been perfect. So another like milestone for me where I was like, oh, hey, time to do some work on me, that actually sent me into a therapist's office, was my littlest, when she was around 2, started displaying a whole ton of anger. And I was like, what is this? Like she was like a little, like she would like bite her sisters and constantly hitting. And like of all my kids, she was the only one that was like that. And I was like, what's happening here? And I wasn't a yeller. I wasn't showing outwardly anger, but it was during the time period that I was going through a separation from my now ex-husband. And the
Mm.
truth was, I embodied a lot of anger,
Yeah.
and it was coming out in her. And so I remember we actually put her in some play therapy when she was around 3, 2.5, 3, somewhere in there. And the therapist at one point looked at me, she goes, who in the house is angry? And I'm like, her. And she's like, who else? And I was like, you mean like who's yelling? And she's like, no, who's angry? And I'm like, oh, I am. Like, that would be me. And she's just like, what does that look like? And I'm like, mostly stuffing it because I don't have a space to let that out. She's just like, you might want to work on that. And so,
Can I ask you a question about that? Like
yeah.
where you were stuffing it and you're aware that in retrospect that you
hmm
were stuffing it. Do you think that it would have been different had you been more allowing of your anger?
I think if I had had a good, healthy place to be working through it, that it would have, like, I don't necessarily think that, like, if I had been yelling with my now ex in front of the kids, that would have been good for them or anything like that. But I think if I had been working through it sooner,
Yeah.
because what we know about kids is they have a lot of what's called mirror neurons. Do you guys know about mirror neurons?
I mean,
I do.
yeah, I was gonna say, I know
Yeah.
that everybody, it's actually a mirror to us. So,
Yeah. So, like the mirror neurons part in our brain, they're the part of our brain that as adults, like if I were to yawn, it would make you yawn because
right,
your brain responds to it. Or if we were sitting in front of each other and one of us crosses our legs, that the other would. Like it's
right.
that subconscious mirroring of what's going on out there.
Yeah.
And so, what we know is in babies and toddlers, they have a higher portion of their brain that's mirror neurons.
Okay.
And so, these little beings feel what other people are feeling.
Right. Which is
Um,
also what we call empathy a lot of times, or
yes.
HSP. So, yeah,
Yes. Yep. And they have done some research to show that they are pretty confident that HSPs and empathetic people and all of that tend to have a higher portion of those.
right.
But babies and toddlers and preschoolers have a bigger portion. So, which is one of the big reasons I'm so passionate about helping moms with, say, postpartum depression. Because when a mom's feeling all this postpartum depression, those mirror neurons in that baby are getting activated. And we want to help that baby to not have to feel that. So, if we help mom, it helps baby. So, there's even like biological level impact when I say, when mom is healthier, the whole world is healthier.
Yeah,
It's true even at the biological level.
right.
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting connection, I think, between mother and child anyway, because I don't know if I'm going to put this exactly right, so bear with me. But even when, we're in utero, they're like, I'm trying to remember exactly, but I think there's different, like, I'll just call it like energies or different things that like the baby can actually take on, like if there's like a sickness or something like that. And the interconnectedness of the child in utero and the mother is so significantly intertwined. So I always find that fascinating, and I can imagine that even when they're born and you have a physical child, that there's a lot of that, the mirroring and that, because there's you start with this sacred interconnection anyway, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. It
Hmm.
does. And it makes sense to me too, because I'd like to add to that. Like, for example, when my mom was pregnant with me, she had just gotten out of she had married out of foster care just to get out of the system. So she'd technically been given up and, not having home and not having family, the whole abandonment. And I absolutely absorbed all that before I even entered this world. And that is something I've had to generational like work through generational
Hmm.
lines of that in this go round. So it's
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely.
Have you read It Didn't Start With You?
I haven't actually. I haven't.
Oh, highly recommend. Great book. But it talks about generational trauma
Yeah.
specifically,
And that's
and
probably
even the
why I haven't
biological
read
piece of
it
it.
because I'm already just aware of that. Like
Yeah.
I already know like how much I work I've had to do, even though it's not
Hmm.
necessarily my responsibility, but here we are. I'm doing
Hmm.
it, but it sounds like a book I should probably take a look at.
Yeah, highly recommend. It was a good one.
Yeah, who was the author again?
I'm really bad at that.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I'll look it up.
I'm like, "Mm."
Google's got your back, girl. I'll look
Yeah,
it up.
I can send it to you later. It's on my bookshelf.
No, it's good. I'll search it.
Um, I will just on the topic of books really quick. I happen to come across that you are actually an avid reader, Amy,
I
or what I would call avid, because I believe it was like 54 books that you read in 2024, right? Is that
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that?
yeah.
girl.
Yeah,
That is a lot.
Yeah,
which
so I've
impressive.
always identified as a bibliophile, in that like I've always wanted to buy the books, but now I'm actually like reading them, which is fun. But yeah, I think what's funny is though that I did not read a single fiction book in adulthood until I was 40. So like all of a sudden when I was 40, I went on a trip and for whatever reason I grabbed a couple books and I read them and I was like, this is really enjoyable. And so now I read both fiction and nonfiction, and try to balance it out and juggle it all. But yeah, I really enjoy reading. It's part of what helps me to go to sleep at night
Yeah,
is
but
reading.
54 books, like, girl, you are a whiz. Like, I guess I probably go through at least like 10 books, maybe sometimes 12 a year, right? Like, I don't have all the time in the world but I do like to read before I go to bed and do all the
Hmm.
things. But like 50, goodness, girl, you are well read.
Yeah, well, and I do include audiobooks in that, and I do
Oh,
spend a
okay.
decent amount of time in my car.
That might be
So
the difference is I don't do any audiobooks. I actually can't
Hmm.
stand audiobooks. I have to have like the actual put my hands on
Yeah. I
it.
prefer to put my hands on it. However, since I spend so much time in my car, it's a great way for me to catch up on some of my like
Yeah.
lists of
Instead of listening to the radio and stupid talk shows and all
uh-huh.
the things because it's just junk.
Yes. And then there's sometimes where I'm like, "Oh, that audiobook was so good. I would then want to go back and read the real book,
Yeah.
like the hand like so sometimes I even double dip. But yeah.
Double
But like if
dip.
you were to ask me even like pre-20, like even 2021, I think I read like 5 books. 2022, I think I made it up to like 12. And I was like, look at me. That's like one a month. This is
No, that's
amazing. And
great.
then
Yeah.
like it just slowly, and then so my goal last year was 30 bucks and I hit that in like August or something. So
Do you ever have like, I'm asking because I'm calling myself out when I ask this question, but do you ever notice that you have like anywhere between 3 to 6 books on your nightstand and you kind of like move between them? Do you ever do that or is that just a me thing?
no, that's legit. And if I were to show
Okay.
you, like,
I
if I
was
were to
gonna
show you
say.
my nightstand, you'd be like, yep, like
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Yeah.
7 over there. And then I've got a couple on my Kindle.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So
I
sometimes
mean,
I will have like, I will be bouncing quite literally sometimes between usually no less than three, but as many
mhm,
as like six. So they're all on my nightstand and I'm like reading them all at the same time. Like I'm reading one, then the next night I read some on the other and I just rotate instead of just
mhm,
sitting down and reading one book till it's done. And I'm like, is
mhm.
this just a me thing? Like, am I just an ADHD thing? I don't even know.
It's partially an ADHD thing, but also
Okay.
like it depends on my mood. Like, am I
Yeah.
in the mood for like I like thrillers and stuff, but sometimes I'm not in the mood for a thriller. Like
Yeah.
maybe I want to read this other kind of book, or I don't read nonfiction before bed because one of the things that I've learned is it wakes me up because my brain's like, let's learn this stuff.
So, and that's,
Um,
I think that's the thing. I don't read anything fiction. It's all do it
mhm.
yourself, nonfiction, self-help, all the, like, I don't do the fiction stuff at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I was until my 40s. And my 40s was when I suddenly was like, hey, there's
Yeah.
kind of some entertaining things to this, and I can read this before bed, and it just puts me right to sleep. It's great.
My aunt's like that. She does like all the fiction books in the world. Like she's a big reader too. So,
Yes. I'm actually, you mentioned like, I think you said you're writing a couple books at the same time,
yeah,
which,
I'm trying to.
same, same. I've got three I'm working on. I've got
Yeah,
a
that's what I'm
children's
doing.
book. Yeah, I've got a children's book, a nonfiction, and a fiction. And then I just recently published, I do have a journal out there called the Motherhood Mindset Journal and Workbook.
Oh, nice.
So actually it's workbook and journal. I said that backwards, but that's just a mindset tool for moms, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you know, I think it's funny because people are like, "Oh, you're writing a book," and it was like, "Uh-huh,
Hmm.
sure,
In my
and
head,
two
I'm
more."
actually writing 8 books, and that's actually my goal, by the way. Like, I actually want to at least write 8 books at minimum. So, in my head, I already have them all organized, but like on paper or computer, whatever you want to say, like
Hmm.
I've started 3 and
Yeah.
I'm trying to get myself in the zone.
Yeah, I have a list of 20 books that I have ideas for. We'll see if they all become real things. But I've got the three that I'm working on. In the children's book, I've already written the manuscript and I have an illustrator that I'm working with. And so that
Nice.
one feels like it's going to come to fruition. And then
I actually
we'll
have a
see where it goes from
children's
here.
book idea that I wanted to do too. So, I would love to see how your book turns out. I'm
Yeah,
excited for
yeah,
you.
yeah. It's pretty exciting. It was a book that kind of came to me one morning when I woke up. I had the whole idea and I was like, I took a shower and the whole idea just kept coming. And I was like, okay. So I sat down and it was like 6:15 in the morning and I poured out a whole manuscript before 6:40, waking up my kids and getting ready for the day. I was like,
Nice.
I'm like, good morning, children. Mommy wrote a book before school today.
If that's not productive fucking parenting, then I don't know what
They're like, you did what? And I'm like,
is.
yep, sure did.
So funny.
I love that. Um, that's amazing. Uh, I would be curious too, just to kind of pivot a little bit back to the motherhood stuff, Amy. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you've asked this of other people, so I thought it would be an interesting question to ask you as well. Um, so, what are some of the qualities that you think, or you would think that make you a super mom? Because I believe, if
It
I'm not
is.
mistaken, that you've asked that of other people. So
Yeah,
I kind of
I
like to
ask it in
turn things
almost
up.
every one of my interviews.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great question. Gosh, that's funny that I don't think anyone's actually asked me that yet. Um,
Talking about mirroring neurons, right?
yeah,
Like that's
Yeah.
what we're
I was
doing
like,
here.
huh. I would say I am an HSP,
Mhm.
and I am an empath, and I think I read my children very well as far as like where they're at, and I can kind of match energy levels a little bit, and so being able to see where they're at and match them there. And so like if they're coming home and they're in a low place, that I can meet them there rather than like coming in up here and like, let's do this and let's do this. And so I think the fact that I can kind of feel that and then respond to it is one of my like superpowers. Um, I would say the fact that I'm really intentional. Intentionality to me in life is one of it's just a beautiful thing, whether it's in motherhood or in your own personal goals or in careers or whatever. The beauty of taking each step intentionally and like thinking through where you want to go and taking the steps to get there makes a huge difference. So I would say intentionality is a huge part of what makes me the mom I am. Um, and this is silly, but it's what just popped in my head, so I'm going to say it. But like, I would say I am a super snuggler. Like, I have always made snuggling a priority in my family. Like, from when they were little and wanting to hold them 24/7 because they were adorable to like, even my 26-year-old, she'll come home and we'll put a movie on and we'll snuggle on the couch and watch. And so like it's just like a way that I connect with them. So that's kind of a silly one, but I think it's really made a big difference in my parenting and the attachment and all those things.
And I don't think it's silly at all because a lot of people are, afraid of touch, trauma response, whatever. And touch doesn't always come so easy to everybody. So I don't think it's silly at all. I think it's absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say my 15-year-old is not a toucher.
Yeah.
She is really high functioning on the spectrum, but like one of the ways that that shows up is she's not human interaction is not her stronghold. And but she's like it's funny because I can still find time. Like she will watch a show with me and like slowly creep closer in the couch until she's like right next to me. So she's kind of like a cat, is what we say. Like you got to kind of wait for her to come to you. Like if you
Yeah.
overbear on her, she runs away. She's like, get
Yeah.
out. Ah.
She's like,
So
in,
like,
in my bubble.
yes. So like I've had to learn kind of how to adapt my parenting to each one of my kids. Like
Yeah.
even though I have the children that I birthed are all biologically girls, like they're all very different from each other, personality wise, interests. Honestly, I think they look a lot different from each other. Like I'm not even sure anyone would be like, yeah, they're clearly sisters. Like I don't know. But but yeah, they're very different. So with each child, I parent them different. I make a focus different. We probably have different inside jokes. Like it's just very different with each child.
It's such a great conversation or great point that you bring up because it makes a great conversation when people like accuse you of favorites. Even your kids will accuse you of favorites, and it's not true. Like as moms, we have kids that need certain pieces of us at certain times. And so that
Mhm.
means at one phase or another, we might be closer to one, but it doesn't make them our favorite. It just means we know which one needs us more and which one doesn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that it can change from one season to the
It
next. Like
absolutely does.
my 10-year-old, I absolutely adore her right now. However, when she was 2, 3, I did not. Like,
Yeah.
not to sound terrible, but like
Yeah.
we butted heads a ton in that phase. And I was like, God, help me. Like
Yeah.
I can get through this. Like,
Yeah.
and so it was a hard phase, but now I seriously, she brings me so much joy, like on a regular basis. But like to think that that's the same child that I was like literally like having to call my bestie and be like, help me get through this. I can't get through today. And now that kid's like the one that looks at me, she's like, you're the best mom ever. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
thanks. So it's fascinating how it could be different. But the other thing I would say for any mom that's out there that may be like, but I kind of do have a favorite. So here's the secret. Some moms do have favorites.
That's okay. I mean, it's
So
okay.
And I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't necessarily point it out to your children, like you're my favorite or whatever. Like
Right.
that can cause some all sorts of problems.
Right.
However, if as the mom you're noticing you're closer to one kid than another, the reality is we feel different kinds of connections with different
Right.
personalities, right?
Yeah.
So like if you have multiple children and they have different personalities, there might be some that you connect with more naturally and you
Yeah.
understand better.
Right.
And so it comes more naturally to parent
Yeah.
them.
It's
Maybe
just more
they're the
fluid than maybe the other ones. And
yes.
there's no shame in that.
And that doesn't mean you love the other kids any less. You
Right.
just might feel a different connection. And that's why you feel that is because there's a different personality, a
Yeah.
different kind of connection. Just
Well,
like
and
we
even like
choose our
human
friends.
design, if you know anything about human design, if
Mm-hmm.
your generators or projectors, like even all those things come into play, or even if you just want to look like at like astrological signs, whatever you want to look at, like there's all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of factors that play into people's different personalities, and you're not
Mm-hmm.
always going to like your family members.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you might not connect with them all in the same way. And I feel like everyone's like, no, parents never have favorites. And I'm like, I'm just going to tell a little secret. Sometimes we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And like, and not in the sense of that means we love that kid more. It means generally more that we feel in a more natural connection. It comes more easy to parent them. Like our personalities jive, our, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and if you're a mom out there listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, like I have had a favorite and I've always felt super guilty about it because everybody says you shouldn't have a favorite. Maybe just looking at it, it's not necessarily that they're your favorite, that you love them more or anything. It's that you just have a different
It's just
connection
that
with
you get
them.
along with them better, and that's okay. Like there's no
Yeah.
shame in that. I
Hmm.
I can honestly say, like my oldest daughter now, she and I are a lot closer than we used to be because she's come into her own. She's a lot
Hmm.
wiser. She's the oldest and more mature and all the things. She's living adult life and
Hmm.
she understands parenting on a different level now that she's kind of doing the adult thing, living on her own. My son and I were closer when he up until he was about 13, and he and
Hmm.
I are not close anymore. Like
Hmm.
we have drifted apart, and there's a lot of factors that play into that, and that's just the way it is. And then my youngest, she and I are becoming closer again now that
Hmm.
she's turning 18. And that all these
Yeah.
relationships come full circle at some point, even if it's not your
Hmm.
kids. It doesn't matter who's in your village. Like
Yeah.
the phases just they come and
Hmm.
go.
And I think that's such a good point, especially for anyone who's listening to this that is in a hard phase with a kid,
Yeah.
that that doesn't mean it's going to be there forever. Like I've
No.
seen so many times where people are having a hard time, especially in those hard teenage years. And then the kids grow up and they come into their own and they figure out adulthood is challenging or whatever. And then all of a sudden, like there's a connection again.
I was
Um,
going to say one thing that all three of my kids had in common was as soon as they hit that like 13 to 15 age range, I was the fucking devil. All of them went through it. I hate my mom. She's a bitch, blah, blah, blah. They all
mhm.
went through it, and they're finding their voice and they're expressing their individuality. And it's just part of the path sometimes.
Well, I've been known to say that if your kids love you all the time, you may be doing something wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
at some point, your kids are probably going to look at you and not necessarily go as far as I hate you, but at least be really pissed off. Like if you never piss off your kids, you're probably not setting boundaries.
Right. You're just people pleasing. There's something going on
Yes.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would be I love all that, by the way. And there's so much truth, I think, to the last piece that you just said. Um, I'd be curious about one thing before we wrap up, but you mentioned about you feeling that you are an HSP and an empath and all of that. And I would be curious how, and I know that can mean different things to different people, but I would be curious how you have navigated parenting as an empath, because I know for me, as the child of somebody, being someone's child and being an empath myself, for me, it was always very unclear about where my energy began and where somebody else, or where mine ended and someone else began, rather.
Hmm.
And then that turned into a lot of like, now I feel kind of responsible for other people's energy and emotions. And so I was kind of carrying, and still struggle with this sometimes, but carrying all this kind of extra weight on my back where, I'm so intertwined with other people. So I'm curious, as the parent, how you've kind of figured out how to navigate that and, figuring out where your energy ends and your child begins. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things. One is I think especially for HSPs, empaths, that self-care is such an important piece so that we are maintaining and regulating ourselves and not expecting our kids to do that for us. But that also we can teach them things like, mom's having a hard day today. Like, uh, but like we can, point out that like, you know, I'm feeling a lot. We can share those emotional words with them or whatever, and we can model that. And so like, but I think taking care of ourselves so that we're not like, I feel like some people use the term HSP when really what they mean is like they feel like they're a hot mess all the time. So they're like, yeah, I'm highly sensitive. And they're just like emotional roller coasters and not well managed. And I'm like, that's not necessarily HSP. Um, but like an HSP can still learn what they need to regulate, what they need for self-care, what they need to manage daily, what they need to manage on a hard day, like all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And when we first regulate ourselves, then when we check in with our kids, we know where we're at. And so if we're feeling a lot when we're checking in with our kids, we can know that that energy might be coming from them versus, oh, that's mine. But, also as a woman with, multiple teenage girls in my home, in addition to feeding off of energies, we feed off of hormones as well.
Right.
And I'm like, whose hormones are going on right now? Like, so it's all of the things. So I think it's a really interesting thing to like check in with yourself first, make sure you're regulated because we
Mm.
can't enter into the dynamics with children who are often dysregulated if we're a hot mess too.
Right. I would second that
Mhm.
totally. And I would say that there was a whole journey wrapped up in figuring out how to regulate myself before I could get to that point too. Because
Totally.
I was the empath and the HSP that was a hot mess because
Hmm.
I was feeling everybody's stuff and didn't know what was what and who was coming and going. Like it was crazy until I was able to ground myself out and figure it out and draw lines and place boundaries and do all the things. It's a lot of work.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, because I'm a therapist, I'm entering into a lot of different energies regularly, right?
Right.
So, like, it was one of the things that I had to learn pretty early on in my career is how to not let every one of those things impact me and how to say debrief at the end of the workday. I remember when my oldest was in second grade, so still pretty little. I worked for social services at the time in foster care, and I dealt with some really hard stuff. And like, I had to figure out like a post work, pre transitioning to motherhood debriefing process for myself to kind of let go of that before I picked her up so that I wasn't taking all of that into my precious few hours with her after school, after work, before bed. So like being intentional about, I teach so many of the women that I work with about like checking in and being aware of where you're at, like at any given moment. And okay, I'm feeling a little triggered right now. How do I bring that back down before I engage in whatever the next thing is?
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. Everything,
And
everything you
that's
just.
I was going to say that's a big responsibility for you to be able to do that and have the awareness that that needs to be done.
Mm.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And, I think so often, you know, so many parents will bring their kids to therapy, like to a therapist and be like, fix my kid. And part of why I stopped working with kids is I just believe so much of it can happen from the parent down. Like, first of all, the parents, our brains are fully developed. We're not working with half developed 12-year-old brains or something. Like,
Yeah.
so if we work with the parent first and we can teach them to regulate, and they're like, but I can't. And I'm like, well, if you can't regulate, how do you expect your 13-year-old to regulate?
Right.
So,
Exactly.
like, we got to start with the fully developed people and help them to regulate, and then they can co-regulate with their children.
It's so true because no matter which child I'm getting along with the best or not, it doesn't matter. When they come home, the one thing that all of them can do is regulate the moment they walk through my door. No matter
Hmm.
how close we are in connection or proximity or whatever, whether we're getting along or not, the moment they walk, you can see it melt right off of their body because
Hmm.
I'm so regulated and I'm so grounded. And then it just, everything they're carrying just drenches to the floor. And everything
Hmm.
about their demeanor changes and they're calm, they're collected. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, welcome home.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and how beautiful that your home gets to be that safe place
Right. Because it didn't
because of
always.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't always like that. And it took me years
Hmm.
to establish this. So
Yeah. And that's what we kind of, everyone strives for that. Like, even if you think about it, like those newborn infants, like
yeah.
they're distressed and they don't even know why, right? Like they're
Yeah.
just like, something doesn't feel right. And
Yeah.
in comes mom. And when mom can come into the space that's like calm and she's like, oh, hello. And she, whether she's nursing or she bottle feeds or she snuggles or whatever, but she meets that need that this little human is like, help me, I can't control myself. And in comes this regulated mom and nurtures that baby, then that baby co-regulates to the mom system and can chill. But what happens, and this is not to blame any mom, but you get like a baby who might be a little more fussy. Maybe they have something physiologically going on. And so that baby comes in and she's fussy, and then mom gets dysregulated, and then baby gets more dysregulated, and in comes dad. Why is the baby still crying or whatever? And like everybody's now dysregulated, and you got to start somewhere, and everyone's just trying to get the baby to calm down. It's like, hold on, let's try getting those adult systems back down.
Yeah.
But it's so hard if you've got a small child screaming their head off.
Well, and it's so hard if you also lack the support. Like if you don't
Yes.
have proper support in your home, in your family, in your community
Hmm.
or friend group, whatever that is, if you do not have the right support, it is extremely difficult to to pull a lot of those things off.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and like I think in our world, we're so transient that people aren't necessarily raising babies in the same community that they're surrounded by family and friends that they've known their whole lives. Like it's a rare instance when that happens. And then even if they are, then there's like family traumas and things like that maybe their family lives really close, but they still don't want them around, right?
Yeah,
So
I
like,
definitely have that story. I'm like that.
yeah. Yeah. And so, like, people feel like they're kind of on an island in a lot of ways. We've never
Yeah,
been more connected through like social media, but like people feel very disconnected in a lot of ways
yeah,
because even if you have a lot of friends who you could maybe even text or post or you care about what's going on in their life, they're not necessarily the friends that will show up in a moment's notice. What do you need from me?
right.
Like, if you ask any given mom, if you needed somebody to come watch your kids right now so you could go to the hospital, who would you call? A large portion of them don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I agree with
So,
that. And it's heartbreaking actually.
hmm, yeah. And that's
Um,
one of the things I'd say time and time again in my interviews with supermoms. One of the things that comes up is that they have, whether it's been natural and inborn, that they actually have family that's super supportive, or others have built their own communities. So they've built their own villages of support network later.
well, and I mean, that's basically what it came down to for my own journey through grief when I lost my youngest daughter.
Mm,
I do not have whatever the healthy family. I have been working very hard to be everything that was nothing like what I came from.
mhm,
And I still have family that I love and that I am connected to, but at, safe distances sometimes because I have such firm boundaries.
mm,
But it made the grief journey a different devil. Grief is hard
mhm.
enough. And
Yeah.
when you lose a child, there's just nothing like it. And then when you do that and you have no family and no support and you're homeless, and I'm giving you examples of my journey, right?
Hmm.
Um, I don't honestly know how I even made it back from that. I really don't. There's
Mm,
sometimes I sit here and I go, something else was pulling me by my fucking hair through it because I didn't do that. I would have checked out at any moment if somebody given me the opportunity. Um,
mhm,
so for me to even have made it this far is bewildering enough. But that I will say that is probably the biggest inspiring piece that led me to get into grief coaching and the stuff that I do now, because nobody should ever feel as alone as I did going through that. No
mhm.
one. That's not normal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean, that is like every mother's worst nightmare. And
right.
then to have to go through that alone, like
Right.
that is
And on top of
unimaginable.
that, going through it alone and then being homeless while you're going through it. So no stability, no safety.
Hey. Sorry. Hey, Holly. Sorry. Hey. You might have gotten an Amazon delivery. That's literally
Oh,
how she
oh,
barks if
okay.
Amazon comes. She has a specific Amazon bark. Um,
I mean,
That's so funny.
recognizable at least, you know.
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
It's really funny because like I also like I kind of took a break from Amazon for like 2 months and I had forgotten about that bark. So that's why I think part of why I jumped so
You're like,
much
oh,
because
that scared me.
oh, she used to bark like that every way too often. Which is why I took the break from Amazon. But
Yeah.
that's really funny. I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, Amazon. We're good. Yeah.
Everything's okay.
Yeah, just Amazon.
That's funny. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, where I was going with that was when you're going through those kinds of things. And then on top of that, I had the hard realization that people around you, even if they say they love you, they don't necessarily know how to love you. And
Yes.
and so during those hard times, I was being kicked in the face and abused by the people closest to me, saying, she's dead, she's not coming back, you should live for your kids, like dismissive, abusive, all the things you could possibly fucking say to somebody that are just wrong. Um, I got it all. And there was as much pain in that story, there was also as much beauty because it took that for me to say, you know what, fuck you. You are toxic to my process. Goodbye. Goodbye. And so that a lot of that alone time was because I was changing my playgrounds in every sense of the word. And there is an integration phase and it's excruciating. But when you come out on the other side, it is an entirely different planet.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times going through those hard times helps us to prune those who were
yeah,
unhealthy out of our life,
yeah.
and helps us to realize where there's deficits of where we need to build in and graft in the healthy people.
Yeah, right. And that's exactly right. So like it was eye-opening nonetheless, you know. And so there's parts of that where I have a lot of gratitude and I go, you know what? I can see the reasons why. And
Hmm.
even though it sucks sometimes, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Lee, you
Do you
got
feel
any
like
more?
you've gotten your, oh, sorry, I was just
No, go
curious if
ahead.
you feel like you've built your community and your village well since then.
Yeah, I would say that yeah, I would say that I have a pretty good group of like 5 people.
Yeah.
I'm not a
Villages don't
big,
have to be big.
yeah, no, I work in small intimate groups. I like
Hmm.
extremely deep connections. I can't deal with surface connections and pleasantries. I'm
Yeah.
not, that's my soul doesn't vibe there. So if you can't go as deep as I can go, then I don't want nothing to do with you. No, no harm, no
Hmm.
foul. Like, you know, like we're just a different breed, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
totally. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. And I'm still building, right? So like I'm not
Hmm.
done building, but I would say, you know, I have a pretty cool little group of support now. So yeah.
You've got people that in those moments where you're like, I need somebody, you know who you can call.
Yeah, and I even have rekindled connections with some of
Mhm.
my family members and it looks completely different now. So
Beautiful.
yeah, yeah,
I love that.
yeah, it's pretty awesome. Lee, did you have any other questions that you wanted to?
Um, no, I think that covers it. Just yeah, just thank you to Amy. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
being
Amy,
here.
you're fun.
Um,
Oh,
yeah.
thanks for having me. Like it's always fun because I'm like, it's been this fun adventure to be guests on other people's podcasts. And then I have to remember, okay, which role am I in right now? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I'm like,
absolutely.
I want to ask you guys questions too.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of like some, you know, like our podcast. I can't speak for everybody, but we like that. We want
Mhm.
like true, authentic, you know, connection. So it works out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's so funny because I like kind of going back to that question from earlier, like as a therapist, I'm the one asking the questions. And like, I remember it's softened a lot over the 20 something years I've been in the field. But when I was first trained, it was like, you don't share anything. It's like this, you're a closed book, like blank slate therapist. And that's not how I roll. Like, if that's what people want, I'm not the therapist for them at all. But
You
like,
know, I was going to say that actually let me ask you a question about that real quick,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Hmm.
Um, I had an experience, I want to say it was in 2012. I was seeing a therapist, and I was going through some crazy shit, stuff with my daughter having her, the separation, the death, all the things. And I remember when she got emotional one time and she had to like hide her face or leave the room. I can't remember what happened, but I
Mm.
asked her, I point blank asked her. I was like, "What? I don't understand like what happened." And she was like, "Well, I'm not allowed to, like you're trained not to show emotion." And
Hmm.
I will tell you that that for me was pretty groundbreaking moment where I was like, you know what? I don't like therapists anymore because
Mm.
it felt so fucking inauthentic and so fake. Like if you can't share in my journey, then you're not going to help me in my journey. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So I'm just
Yeah.
curious like what your thought is on like sharing emotion, like really validating and getting in there, especially if you're an HSP and you already have to have boundaries and walls around that. Like, where do you stand on that?
So, I mean, there are still therapists who are old school that are
Yeah,
like, I'm going to be blank face.
right.
That's not me. I tell people that right off the bat. Like,
Yeah,
and in fact, some people might want somebody like that. And if that's the case, I'm not the one for them because I am very facially expressive. Like,
yeah,
I literally can't even get my face to not do much facial expression.
yeah.
So I'm very readable.
I'm like
And
that too.
yeah, because I'm an empath, because I'm an HSP, like, if somebody's telling me a really hard story, my face is going to reflect that. I'm not going to be like over there, like, I literally can't make my face blank, but
Yeah,
I can't do a blank face while they're pouring their heart out. And yeah, I've cried with clients.
yeah.
Now, the thing is, as a therapist, my reaction should be smaller than theirs. So, like, if they just told something to me that is really sad, but yet they're just barely reacting and I'm over here sobbing my eyes out, that's probably a problem. Like, I shouldn't be worse off than the client where they feel like they have to then comfort me because, oh my gosh, are you okay? Right. And so that's, I think, the bigger problem with what happened in that dynamic was like, not only did she have to like deal with it, but then you were like, what happened here? Like,
Do you think
you
some of that was
became
because you're the HSP and absorbing some of the stuff she was repressing though?
possibly. I
Yeah, I was
mean,
just curious.
yeah, I mean, it could be, or it, and that's where that self-awareness piece has to come from. And that every good therapist needs a therapist. Like,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, I
Like I have a
remember,
therapist and I love him to death. I don't
mhm,
see him very often. I see him like right now. I've seen him I think once this whole last year.
mhm,
So I don't see him very often anymore. But like I love him to death. So I think having a good therapist is so
yeah.
important.
Well, and I remember like there's times though that maybe we're humans too as therapists that maybe it just hits too close to home. Like I
Yeah.
remember I lost my dad in 2021 and I remember thinking like hopefully nobody's going to come in here in the next couple of weeks
Oh
wanting to
no.
process having lost their father or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Like and I took a good break from it, but like even as I went back I was like okay, that would trigger something in me. It would hit
Yeah.
too close to home, too fresh.
Yeah.
And so like again, we're humans too. That can happen sometimes. And for all we know, maybe that was even part of what was going on with that therapist is it did hit too close to home or something.
Yeah.
Um, and
It
so that
wasn't
can
her that I
happen.
even had the problem with. It was the fact that the
She's like,
therapists were
that's how we're
being
trained. Yeah.
trained that way. And I was like, yeah, I have a problem with that. The idea
Yeah.
that you should be this blank slate like that. I mean, I could just talk to a fucking robot and throw money at that. That'd do me just
Yeah.
as good. Like, I'm not okay with that.
And that is old school, like kind of Freudian old school
Yeah.
level, like we are trying to be super blank slate, which
Yeah.
is why, some of those old school philosophies even have you laying on a couch, not even looking at the therapist, at the therapist behind
Right.
them. So you can't even see them. So you're not responding to how they're responding. You're
Right.
responding only to yourself, which, there's validity to some of that stuff
Yeah,
too.
sure. I mean, if you
But
just need a soundboard, fine.
yes. But the reality is that, like, I show up with my whole self when I show up to therapy. Like, and I tell my clients that, which means, they get my wacky facial
Yeah.
expressions or, my jokes,
They
at
get your
times.
engagement.
Yeah, I'm fully there.
Yeah.
Which means also on the flip side that when therapists do that, we can't see as many clients in a week, right? Like, good therapists that are showing up with their whole self. Hopefully this doesn't offend too many people, but you can't see 40 clients a week
Yeah.
if you are showing up with your whole self, because you are going for an emotional roller coaster, because every 40 client is going to
Right.
be in a different place.
Yeah.
So if you're showing up as your whole self with each client and you are emotionally being present and available to them in that session, you can't see 40 clients.
Yeah, for sure. There's no way. Yeah.
Well, like you said earlier too, I mean, that's 40 different energy fields in a very specific way that you are meeting and
Yeah.
engaging with those energy fields. So that completely makes sense.
Yeah. That
Mm-hmm.
would be really hard. 'Cause I couldn't even imagine pulling off like coaching clients that often in a week or even
Mm-hmm.
doing a psychic medium sessions. I could not, that would be too much for me. Like,
Mm.
cause you
Yeah.
would be all over the place. You would have to
Yeah.
be.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Like, there have been days, I think the most I've ever seen in a single day was 8. And I came home and I was so beyond drained. And I
Oh, I
was
bet.
like, that was not a good choice.
You're
I
like,
will
now I
never do
need
that
2 fucking
again.
days off just
Yeah,
to recover from
basically.
that. Yeah.
Basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can handle up to maybe 6, but even then, that's exhausting.
Yeah.
I prefer no more than 5 in a day.
Yeah. 4 or
And
5
I
is
only see
probably like a
clients
good
3 days
number.
a week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it works out to like a nice sweet 15, which some people like must be nice to work only 15 hours a week. I'm like, oh, it's cute
You're
that you
like,
think that's all we do.
that's so
It's
funny.
cute.
Yeah. I love your idea of what I do. It's so great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, like that would be like saying, like to anybody else in any other field, that the only work that they do is in the exact moment that they've got a client on the phone.
Right.
Mm.
Because
Like,
there's no admin work involved or other stuff going on behind the scenes at all.
or, the massive amounts of continuing education we have to
Yeah.
have just
That,
to
yeah.
maintain our license
Yeah.
and all of the paperwork and all of the,
And the
if we're running our
insurance
own
and all the
business.
things. Do you take
Yeah.
insurance? Do you even have to
I
worry about
don't
that?
anymore.
Okay.
I've
Yeah.
been all private pay for a little over a year now. I
But
keep
before that, there
honestly,
was insurance and codes and all that too. So,
yes, yeah. And then the insurance pays it, and they're like, "Just kidding, we changed our mind. You got to give that money back. You got to go ask the client
yeah.
instead." And it's like, ugh. It was a
So
nightmare.
funny. Yeah. Actually, that's what Beck said, huh, Lee? Beck said the same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. She
Yep.
said that too.
Almost echoed the same exact thing.
She's a friend of ours, a therapist as well, and she has, yeah, pretty much the same story on that.
And it's hard because I do have such a heart for helping people. That's why I started my podcast, because it's a free resource
Yeah.
to be
Mm.
supportive to people. And so I do know that for vast majority of Americans, like, you know, that therapy would be considered a big luxury if they're having to private pay, that they would like to use their medical insurance. We all have to have it, might as well use it, right?
Right.
Which makes a ton of sense to me. However, the insurance industry like has way too much control. It
Yeah.
breaches confidentiality. You have to have a diagnosis. They can say, oh, you get 6 sessions. And I'm like, cool, I'm glad I can solve that childhood trauma in 6 sessions.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
there's a lot of reasons to go private pay. But I still have lots of like conflicting empath feelings about the fact that I can't just be like, everybody comes for free. Like,
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because like I said, our friend Beck pretty much said the same thing. Like she pretty much parroted the same things that you said just now. Like I want to say it was almost like word for word.
yeah,
Well, the
they're
empath.
pretty common.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. The empath, everybody comes for free though. That's so real. Like that
It
is,
is.
I can identify with that so much. I tell the story all the time that, I mean, for years I was, I was working like 2 retail jobs at the time, and you're in people's energy fields in a very specific way all day long.
Hmm.
And then I was sitting down in people's living rooms, like channeling their departed loved ones for like 4 hours after the fact. And this was just a common kind of thing because I had this thing where I was like, oh, I shouldn't be charging money for, the time and the energy. So what you said is so resonant, and I can totally appreciate.
Yeah.
And it's
And
it's an ongoing process. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like it is kind of over your career, like an ongoing process. I can still remember, I do still offer a very select small amount of sliding scale spots, but I remember a couple years back, I had a client who requested, due to financial hardship, to get a sliding scale, and I gave it to her because she had, a powerful story, and I wanted to help her. And then partway through, she needed to take a 2-month break because she was going to Europe for 2 months.
Oh,
Mm.
okay.
And I was like, wait a minute. So hold on. Like, you can't afford to pay me my rate, but you can afford 2 months in Europe? Hmm.
Yeah,
Sounds like we can go back to regular rate. Like,
yeah, yeah,
sounds like it's a value thing more than anything. You
yeah.
value Europe more than therapy, and that's okay if that's the case,
Right.
but I value my time too.
Right. And that's where you
Right.
have to be discerning about like, okay, this is not, like you have to be selective about who gets the private or the sliding scale and stuff. So
Exactly, because I can't afford to run my business at the sliding scale rate
yeah,
by
yeah.
the time I pay all my overhead.
That's more like almost like volunteer work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it basically is.
Yeah. So yeah,
So
fair
I'd
enough.
rather give that to somebody who truly is not in a place to go to Europe for 2 months.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. Fair.
It's totally
Definitely fair.
fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, lady. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I think that we had some pretty awesome conversations. Can you tell our listeners where's the easiest place to find you?
Yeah, well, if you love podcasts, I would love for you to slide on over to mine, Everyday Supermoms. We share great stories about moms and their super strengths, as well as their authentic struggles. So we get into the hard stuff. But you can find me also on Instagram at Hey Amy Grace and follow me there. I have updates about my podcast and all things motherhood. So if you're a mom, check me out there.
If you're looking for guests, and somebody wants to come be a guest speaker on your podcast, how would they go about doing that?
The easiest way to do that is to go to my podcast part of my website, and you can go there straight through everydaysupermoms.com. And at the bottom of the page, you can apply to be a guest.
Nice. Okay. We're going to have
Oh,
all your information that you gave us too in the show notes for sure. But yeah.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time with us. I think we had some pretty awesome conversations. Lee, do you have anything that you want to add before we say goodbye?
no, just thank you. Thank you. It was so
Yeah.
wonderful getting to hear your journey and your story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
Okay. Well, guys, if you guys want to reach out to us for any suggestions, topic ideas, or you want to be a guest on our show, you can email us at ownyouressence@gmail.com. And other than that, we will see you next time around. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on Own Your Essence. We're so grateful to our guests for sharing their wisdom and to you, our listeners, for being part of this journey towards healing and empowerment. If today's conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share this space with others who might need it. If you have any questions, topic ideas, want to be a guest, or would like to work with myself or April privately, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you next episode.